Hello, I'm Mathew Schwartz with ISMG. It's my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG Studio, Danny Brickman, co-founder and CEO of Oasis Security. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
It's my pleasure, especially because we're going to be talking about agentic AI. And I've been to some of the sessions at this year's RSAC conference. It's not just AI that everyone's talking about, but agentic. Some of the leading figures in the industry going, this agentic thing has caught us by surprise. We don't know where it's going. We think it's going to be a big challenge. It's already a big challenge. And one of the challenging points, especially for CISOs, has been on the identity and the access management front. Why is that?
Ooh. First of all, yeah, the agentic piece caught everyone by surprise, right? Even like the most progressive engineers are finding themselves right now need to rethink about everything. But let's roll back to the CISO, the security landscape, right? So basically in a very simple manner that we're seeing, there is an understanding today in the market that an agent is as good as the access that is being granted to that, right? An agent without an access basically means nothing, right? An agent with a full access to your enterprise data has the full potential value given to the organization, right? So basically access becomes this coin of value for organizations, right? Everyone wants to grant agents way more than what the organization actually wants them to be granted. But the part that like makes everyone panicking right now is that we were building all of our infrastructure based on humans, right? Our identity and access management was built to support people joining the organization. Suddenly we have non-people joining the organization, right? But the systems are like caught by surprise, right? The infrastructure caught by surprise. All the big architectures that we were building through the years were caught by surprise. And now CISOs are trying to figure out how to address it.
Mm-hmm. So you've got machine identities and you need some new thinking in terms of how you're going to attempt to govern this sort of thing. Where does the CISO start?
The first starting point is to see what he's not seeing today, right? If we were living in the world of human first, we will go to HR systems, right? We will know who is in our organization, right? Who are the people? And then with that, we can propagate and understand what identities we have.
There might be some shadow IT, but at least you can get a handle on who is logging in.
Exactly. On the agentic side, CISOs has no clue today what they have in their system, right? Because the reality is we want to enable this agentic revolution. We all want to enable that. That's so fascinating and amazing, so much value, right? But then we're losing control of like, what do we really have? First step is gaining that visibility.
So what do? You've got these AI agents. You want to ensure that you're rolling them out in a way that is responsible, at least to the organization's security posture.
Yes.
As people are experimenting, we still don't know all the possibilities. We probably won't for a long time in terms of how these can be used, the value that they can bring. How do you think about giving them secure and controlled access to enterprise systems if you're going to achieve the value that we think they're going to deliver?
So we need to flip our mode of thinking around that, right? So again, human identities. How did we determine what access a human needs to do and needs to get? Based on his job title or like who he is in the organization, his role. Agents doesn't have a role. They're ephemeral in their nature. They're changing all the time. What they're basing their action and access is based on intent. An agent today is expressing exactly what he wants to do. So what we need to do as global leaders of security is to flip our mindset and build our access controls based on intent. And this is, I think, one of the biggest revolutions that identity and access management has been through.
Intent is an interesting word. You see it, for example, in the financial landscape, the attempt to discern intent, perhaps to know if something's fraudulent or not. When it comes to the identity and access management space, though, how do you start to determine intent? What sorts of signals, if it's signals that you're looking at, can you study, hopefully baseline, dynamically respond to? How do you even begin that journey?
Ooh, yeah. So there's like, it's like the tip of the iceberg basically, and then there's a lot of elements inside. Let's start with the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is we have something that we didn't have before. the intent is being expressed in a natural language, right? When you're asking your ChatGPT, Claude, pick your agent to perform something, you're writing it. You're expressing what you want in a very clear way. This request is being propagated to the access systems. So for the first time ever, an access has an intent as a topic. Now you're right, there's multiple more signals. There's a policy that is coming on top of that we need to basically create a fusion of all those sensors to approve an access. But that model that we are started with, like expressing in a natural language intent, is something that we never had before, which is an opportunity for us to rethink how identity and access should be managed.
Really fascinating to me, the looking at the initial access request. I hadn't thought of that because obviously you're inside an enterprise. You have access to those sorts of signals, or as you say, sensors. You can look at what the query was, I suppose, and then say, does this seem like something that is really needed for what they're attempting? They're trying to run a report on whatever, the cybersecurity posture, let's say.
Exactly.
And they're asking for access to the financial system. Do we think that's something that should be approved? Maybe not in that case. So now you talked about working with identity and the enterprise infrastructure. What's the role of identity providers when you're trying to keep track of whether or not something should have access? Where does it come into play in terms of sensors or reliability or building a fuller picture?
So it blends into a bigger problem we have, but also a bigger opportunity we have right now in the market, right? We have many identity providers. Every enterprise today has dozens of providers of identities, right? Every application, every database today is his own IDP, identity provider. So again, if we're looking at how we were building for many years our identity, it's like we were centralized everything into a single identity provider. But agents are not acting the same way. They will consume every possible way of accessing, right, to this database. So they will use different identity providers. And instead of forcing that centralization like we were doing for many years, we actually should accept that this centralization is happening and create a governance on top of that, normalizing basically all of those different parts, right? So turning this problem into an opportunity to actually enable a faster adoption of access and agentic adoption in the organizations.
So you can't control it. And we've seen that AI in general is really good at routing around potential blocks.
Yes.
And we hear some amazing stuff, especially in the research realm, where it'll practically phone you up and ask you to do it instead. I mean, a bit of a stretch, but it's very, very innovative itself. So stepping back, as you say, and just letting it do what it's going to do in terms of how it's trying to get to the end result, but keeping better tabs on what it's doing to get there. You say by tapping more into the identity providers that it needs to go through.
Yes. But also, we need to think about it in a different granular way of access, right?
And how do you provide that level of granularity?
So first of all, we're looking at that from a session-based. So when a person comes into the organization, it can take us months or years to even change a permission, right? Like it's like it was.
They get onboarded.
Exactly.
If they get offboarded, hopefully
we're cleaning it up, but like we're not changing permissions that much, right? On the agent side, we actually need to think about it on a session base. Every request is a scope, which we should allow an access, but only according to the intent. If you think about it, it's like, you don't want your kids right now running on the streets, right? Like, because there's like too much danger around that. But if we're putting a nice sandbox, right? And we're allowing them to perform and to do and to make their own decisions in that sandbox, we didn't limit them that much. They still can do whatever they want, right? But we're removing the risk around. So if we're putting those guardrails, if we're putting those basically session-based scoping, we're creating a situation in which we can innovate, we can perform. There's no harm to the business, but there's also no harm for security perspectives.
Yeah. So CISOs trying to govern what agents are doing on their behalf, hopefully, and to sandbox them, corral them, I think maybe is the word I'm looking for.
Corral.
So need to take this this approach. Sounds good. Are there any challenges in the near term that you're hoping to get beyond as this goes forward? I expect we're going to be seeing more and more agents. There's going to be a scale that we're going to have to keep up with.
First of all, my recommendation to everyone, meditation, right? We need to simplify things. We need to think about it clearly. Panicking around more agents joining is like, okay, that's good. That's natural. That's the evolution we're living through. Protect what you can protect, right? Like even in meditation, like was like control what you can control, and like let the rest evolve. It's reality. Like we're smart. Like we're surrounded by people that will figure out what's right and wrong, right? And this is why we strongly believe that if you have a control over your access, identities and access in your organization, this is in your perimeter of like controlling, right? Let's focus on that. Let's simplify it, and let different agents. It will happen. We'll have 10x, 100x, 1,000,000x agents in a few years, no matter what is the prediction. Let's accept that.
Sage advice, remaining calm, always a good strategy when it comes to cybersecurity. Danny, thank you so much for filling us in on with the rise of agents, what to do about it to keep them under control. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
I have been speaking with Danny Brickman of Oasis Security. I'm Mathew Schwartz with ISMG. Thank you for joining us.